Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football late Tuesday morning. Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers potentially find just a diamond in the rough. Three-star quarterback Chris Denson from the state of Florida flipping his commitment from Coastal Carolina to Clemson. Yeah, full transparency here. 48 hours ago, I've never even heard of Chris Denson, never seen any of his film. Saw the news pop up on Twitter this morning, decided to buzz a little bit of the 2024 stuff, his senior year film. This is an exciting one. And, many of y'all know we talk a lot about the recruiting trail. These are some of my favorite recruitments and commitments to cover because this is just Clemson going out and kind of trusting their personnel department. Hey, we found this kid in Plant City, Florida. Not a lot of Power 4 teams are interested in him. He's committed to Coastal Carolina. Let's go take a look at him. And Chris Denson, he's a fun one. I mean, he's a lefty gunslinger with a very, very live arm. There's not many throws that he can make. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's an extremely creative quarterback in terms of extending plays. He's one of those quarterbacks that you're going to have to game plan around in terms of what he can do as an athlete. Now he's going to have to, I think, develop a little bit more physically, 6'1.5", a $175, and he doesn't look much heavier than a $175. He's got a very slight frame. You're going to have to put some weight on him if he wants to, kind of withstand that power for kind of competition. But I think Chris Denson, you talk about late in the process, trying to find a quarterback that could give you some really big time upside. I think Chris Denson could be one of those guys. Excited to get into the film a little bit now. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Clemson fans. It's been a frustrating last couple of weeks on the recruiting trail, right? Couple late flips out of Clemson's class. We'll see what Clemson can do over the next couple of weeks up until signing day. But the amount of support y'all continue to show means the absolute world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into Chris Denson now. You take a look at the numbers in 2024, 2,300 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, a 65% completion percentage, which you like to see. And this is a kid that pushes the ball down the field. I mean, you turn on some of the film and say he pushes it very, very effectively, can throw off platform, over 1,100 rushing yards as well. You're going to see a couple of things that to me stand out on the film. One, he's really, really comfortable attacking the deeper third, and he can do it in a lot of different ways. He can throw it on a rope. He can kind of put those moon shots in a little, kind of layering them over. A lot of different ways he can deliver the football, which I think you like a lot. I think secondly, there's a lot of different platforms and arm angles that Chris Denson can use as well. Again, the creativity at the quarterback position is impressive, and that is something that is becoming more and more important for not only college football quarterbacks, but NFL quarterbacks, like being able to get outside the pocket, give your wide receivers a second chance to create some separation. When you have a quarterback that can be dangerous in that element, I mean, it just puts a lot more stress on a defense. When you talk about game planning against quarterbacks like Chris Denson, that's kind of what you have to consider. And so this is one of those where you're kind of taking a flyer. This is not a guy that a lot of Power 4 teams were going after. But I do think there's some really high upside here. And if you're going to take a flyer, you might as well take a flyer on a guy that's going to give you that high upside. There's a very real chance he never plays a meaningful snap for Clemson at quarterback, and I think that's okay. But there's also a very real chance that Chris Denson can be a nightmare for opposing defenses to game plan against over the next couple of years for this Clemson offense. I want to get into a little bit of the film. Now, when you start getting into Chris Denson, there's a couple of things that really stand out. One, really quick twitchy release. I mean, this is a guy that just it does not have a long motion and a very, very snappy arm. And he's twitchy. He's a twitchy athlete, and you see that. Again, extending plays, this is what I love most. And he doesn't only extend plays to scramble, which is something that we see a lot from young quarterbacks. Hey, I'm going to get outside the pocket, and I'm going to keep my eyes downfield. And you see this one just putting it absolutely on a rope. Perfect ball placement. Again, I think the deeper third is something that's really, really impressive. He does not miss much, and he's consistently putting it in stride to his wide receivers when he decides to attack the deeper third. Now you see the creativity. This is a guy that he just can play some backyard football and throw off some weird arm angles and find wide receivers open down the field. This is a guy that, again, if he puts all his tools together, I think could give you some really high upside. And if you're a defensive coordinator, it is It's hard to game plan against a quarterback that is this creative and this athletic. You kind of see the athleticism on full display. Straight line speed is there. Really twitchy athlete too. I mean, there's kind of a difference between this kid and a kid like Cade Klubnik. You know, you look at Cade and say he won't really make you miss. Cade can cook in a straight line, and we saw that against Pitt. But he's not necessarily a guy that's going to make a ton of people miss in a phone booth. Chris Denson's got a little bit more of that shake. I'm not going to go as far and say he's Lamar Jackson, but he's a guy that can kind of shake you out of your shoes, be a little bit more twitchy as an athlete, continue to work through the film. Again, I love the release. A little bit of a moon ball here. We've seen him throw some ropes. We've seen him kind of throw some moon balls as well, layering it over that safety, just dropping it in a bucket. A lot of different kind of throws that Chris Denson going to make. And again, just really, really creative, making people miss. This is kind of what I mean by making you miss in a phone booth. Really comfortable with the football in his hands. And you can tell he's really comfortable playing some of that backyard football. Really good throwing off the run. Again, I like what he can do as a pocket passer. I think when you turn on the film, you kind of assume he's not going to be much of a pocket passer. I like what he does from the pocket. He seems like a guy that has pretty strong command of an offense. But when it comes to getting outside the pocket and being creative, he certainly can do that as well. Ball placement seems to be pretty dang good as well. I'm excited for this kid. And again, these are kind of my favorite ones where, look, you talk about Sunday night. I had never even heard of Chris Denson. And now I'm kind of excited to see what he can do with Clemson over the next couple of years. Now, you look at Clemson in 2025, it's been a frustrating recruiting cycle where we were talking about Clemson having a top 8 class in the summer. They kind of got hot on the recruiting trail, and a lot of those commitments have slipped away over the last couple of weeks and, haven't really added much. You kind of still like what you've done, especially along the line of scrimmage. But I will say this, you have 14 commitments now in the fold for Clemson. If you bring in this small of a class in 2025, I do think it's going to force Dabo to potentially go to the transfer portal. And this is a very, very small class at the high school ranks to not supplement in the transfer portal. So we'll see if there's a change in Dabo Swinney's mentality in terms of how he wants to build a roster with this Clemson program. Again, I've been a very strong proponent of, look, I don't need Dabo Swinney to go add 30 players in the transfer portal, but I do think you can't continue to allow everybody else around you to use the transfer portal, which is a massive asset when you talk about filling in your roster. I don't know if it's sustainable for Clemson to continue to sit there on their hands and not use something that everybody else is using around you. And again, we don't need Clemson. Clemson does not need to add 30 players in the transfer portal. They develop players really well. They recruit the high school ranks relatively well, but you can't allow everybody else to use something and you not and kind of expect to compete at the same level. We'll see if they make some changes. We'll sign out there. Chris Denson, very, very exciting. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.